Wow. What's up, everybody? So we are back for yet another video in my entertainment industry series. Again, I still don't know what to call it, so I'm just calling it entertainment industry series, which, yes, it's a long, terrible, clunky name, so we all have to deal with it. I don't yet know what I'm going to title this video, but I can tell you what it's going to be on. It is going to be on rejection, and specifically rejection in the way of how it, I guess, shapes the artist. And we are going to revisit the stuff that I was talking about with the artist's ego. So let me just get this question and answer out of the way. Is that some of you probably are going to, since I'm going to be talking again about things that seem to go hand in hand with ego, is that why is it that this gets its own video? Well, first off, it's because I'm trying to make these videos shorter. As you all know by now, I am very long-winded, and I actually don't talk just to hear myself talk. Uh, Especially because you all know that, like, when you record something and then you listen back to it and you hear your voice, it's like, oh wow, that's how I sound. But ever since I got some dental surgery a couple of years back, my voice has been sounding a lot more nasally than it usually has sounded for years and years, pretty much my entire life. And I don't know. It's very strange. It's very strange to me. It's harder to breathe too. My sinuses feel like they're always clogged. Anyways, that's a completely different story and has nothing to do with this. Anyways, in answering the question of why this gets its own video, I think that rejection, and to a greater extent some of the other things that go along with it, they play such a huge part in the life of the artist that I felt compelled to give them their own proper due. What we have to do is that we have to go back to the ego that I was talking about in the original video, and specifically looking at the quote unquote hypocrisy, which I'm still going to stick with that. You can call it cognitive dissonance. You can call it tricking yourself or revving yourself up. You can call it just being super confident about something. You could try to water it down, but let's keep it real. Again, the way in which I put it, it's just real. It's raw. It tries to cut to the point immediately. There's a certain arrogance in saying that, yes, my stuff is bad, is good. It's good enough for people to pay for, right? So then we move on to this idea of rejection. So as an artist or as an entertainer, as someone who wants to be in this industry, you have to admit to yourself, or that you have to at least learn very early, is that once you take on this as potentially your life, as the rest of your life, as your career, you then have to make sure that you are incredibly comfortable with rejection. Rejection essentially becomes its own family member, like your family member. So when you enter, in general, you are unknown. People are not going to respect, or maybe that's the improper word to say. It's not that they're going to disrespect you, but they're not going to think that you are as talented and as worthy of, I don't know, notoriety or money, or even just roles, a job. They're not going to think that you are worthy of those things, right? So you deal with a lot of rejection. So what happens is that for the people who are successful, and obviously there are different levels of success, the first thing that we have to grapple with is figuring out just how much failure and how much rejection we can actually take and live with. And the reason why most people never become famous, and at least they don't work in the industry. Like, again, they can become famous through social media, which social media has changed the landscape of pretty much everything. But the reason why they don't tend to work in the industry, or they don't work there for very long, is because like 99% of most people do not have a high level of, or high tolerance for rejection. Really only people within this industry, and then you have like CEOs, corporate people who are at the highest echelon, and then of course you have politicians. But everybody else does not have to go through nearly as much rejection. Rejection does not just come when you are young, as far as within the industry. Like, you don't have to be young of age, but maybe you start acting at 40, 50, whatever. you most likely are still going to feel a lot of rejection, not just when you are young in the industry, but even when you age. And there's different reasons, and there's different groups that feel it. And again, there's different ideas around and as to why you will still feel rejection. But we just had an Oscars in which we saw not only Michelle Yeoh, but we saw Brendan Fraser, and we saw God, I don't even know his name. In any case, we saw these people. Like I said, I didn't see it, but I did see maybe a few clips. Well, I read the articles, and in the articles, Michelle Yeoh and Brendan Fraser, they talked about how it has been difficult, even now, at this later stage in life, at this later stage in their careers, but not only to just get roles, period, but to get roles that are good, to get roles that they think they can actually embody. Rejection is going to always be part of the equation, no matter how long you live, no matter how big of a star you get, no matter how many people know your name. There's always going to be someone who is going to reject you and say, yeah, you're not right for that role. You shouldn't be writing that movie. You shouldn't be directing that movie, etc. So we have to make rejection our bedfellow. Take a regular person and you look at their lives and you look at their lives in total, but then also you make sure that you look at their career as well. The majority of people, once they get a role within their career field, and not just, like a summer job or something for a teenager, once they get a role in their career field, they essentially can stay in that job, in that same position for years and years and years on end. They don't necessarily have to jump ship and move from one company to the next if they don't want to, and or if the company is successful. They can stay in the same position, or they could potentially create their own thing, right? They don't tend to get rejected until they try to either pursue a new career or pursue a promotion or something to that extent. Actors, actresses, people within the entertainment industry all the time, we always have to be on a little bit on edge simply because we are rejected all the time. Yes, my first book may sell well, but will my second? Will my third? Sometimes even established authors then have to start looking for new publishers, new agents, new managers in between publishing successful books. It's never a case in which we can get fully comfortable because rejection has left the building and we no longer have to deal with it. We will always have to deal with it. And that's on top of all the other rejection that life serves up for, all of us individuals. You then go back to the ego and you bounce back to you and you start to dig in and you go, okay, so we look at the fact that there was a hypocrisy there, right? So we had to embrace that we were not only good, but that we were good enough or even great enough to warrant getting work, to warrant actually getting jobs, to warrant people actually believing in us, believing in what we do, believing in what we can create. So then once you factor in the rejection and you have, let's say you have some success, but then you have rejection again. So it goes rejection, success, rejection again. What kicks in is that, well, you already know that you are good, that you are good enough because of the fact that you had that one success, or maybe you had a few successes or what have you. Or maybe you haven't had any success, but you still feel like you're good enough, maybe because someone has convinced you of that thing. Well, from then on, the ego, actually, the arrogance, the confidence, the whatever you want to call it, it actually morphs. It goes through a metamorphosis in that it grows up and it matures into something even greater than that. Because at this point, what generally has happened is that we have, waste is not the proper word, but I'm just going to use it here because I can't think of a better word. We have, for the most part, for lack of a better word, wasted our time and a lot of effort into doing something that people who are the gatekeepers of our particular art or our particular entertainment don't think that we are good at. And so our minds then have to warp and take on a new level of hypocrisy that's even greater than the other one. And that hypocrisy comes in the form of a calling or a purpose. When you look at a movie like, say, the film Whiplash, it established itself as a great model of the mind of an artist or an entertainer. And the reason why is because in the film, if you've seen the film, the main character played by Miles Teller, he wants to be a great jazz musician. He a great jazz drummer. He is willing to essentially sacrifice almost everything for it. Well, at the point in which he's willing to sacrifice almost everything for it, and he's willing to go through physical pain, mental pain, emotional pain, stress, and all that stuff, his idea of wanting to be great no longer is just his ego pushing him. He has now transformed his ego into a calling, that he has accepted that this thing is his purpose. For better or for worse, he's going to essentially pursue anything that pushes him towards his purpose pretty much for almost until it's almost until he either has a breakdown of some sort, or until he feels like he can no longer do it anymore for other reasons. You know, maybe he has poor health, maybe he finally wants to start a family, etc., etc. But the level of the calling, and the reason why it is important, is because of the fact that when someone has a calling, when someone has what they think is a purpose, is their purpose in life, they are willing to take on things, whatever sort of things, that will push them into, again, that will push them further toward their purpose. So in my own life, in the last couple of years in which I've been very much so considering and still leaning towards giving up on this dream, this idea, I have asked multiple times for God to essentially take away whatever this quote unquote gift is of creating ideas within my mind, like new ideas, things that I think that other people wouldn't think of, or ideas for stories, ideas for dialogue, etc., ideas for characters, etc., etc. The interesting part is that the more and more I try to pull away from creating these types of stories and characters, the more and more I'm still able to create them, but not in the sort of minutia that is the real work. Like, I'll come up with a big idea, and then I would have to work on all of the tiny little fragments that actually make it into something. And it is somewhat exhausting, because it becomes this roller coaster of, well, if I got this idea in my head, then clearly, and I haven't seen this idea either anywhere or very much at all, then clearly it has to mean something, right? Clearly there must be some meaning behind it, some purpose, some sort of elevation. The reason why artists do this is not just to protect themselves from the onslaught of rejection within the industry, but it's also, in some ways, it becomes almost like a second nature for them. That if you can believe in something, weirdly enough, higher than you, then whatever you're doing has a purpose, right? It's basically the old adage of everything happens for a reason. So going through tough times, eating ramen, living in your car, being poor, being whatever, you can do that and still do it with a halfway of a smile, or still maintain a certain level of decency, of humanity, so long as you know that it is in service of a higher purpose, of a higher calling. It helps to push the artist forward. So then why is it that we need to know that? I think that it is a good thing to at least understand artists and entertainers from this sort of perspective, understanding the ego of them, right? Because when you do that, you can then understand why it is that they make some of the choices that they do. For an artist, in creating in your mind this idea that, well, this is a thing that I have to do. This is a thing that I was put on earth to do. This is the thing that is my purpose, my calling. Two things tend to happen. So the first thing is that the calling can allow the artist or the entertainer embrace a certain level of selfishness, a certain level of self-centeredness. And so it essentially goes like this. It essentially goes like, well, since this is my calling, then I don't necessarily have to, in some ways, respect or deal with what other people think about my calling. The way that usually manifests is that a person can, say for an actor or actress, a person can and will focus only on making a certain type and certain level of film. Then the other way is that the person can still be selfish, but they will focus on making another type of film. So one can make a film that is where all of what they're doing, all of their art, is solely based and focused on them and how they feel about the art, and whether the art is good to them, whether the art is entertaining to them, etc. And then the other one can focus in on, okay, well, What do the fans think? Is the art good to the fans? Is it does it treat the fans well? Does it give the fans what they need? And again, we see this sort of, I guess, dichotomy or splitting in the industry depending on generally on when or where a person is in their life. Maybe I should actually tell you what the second thing that the calling, so to speak, allows you to embrace as an artist or entertainer before I say what I was going to say. The second thing that allows you to embrace is categorization. So once you do get to a certain level, say that you do have a couple of successes in a row, by the time you get to there, you can revisit the idea of this calling and what the calling meant in the first place and why it is there to begin with. Essentially, what you can say is that about the calling is that there is going to be a point in time in which you reach, in which you feel as if you are now actually fulfilling the calling that you have. So yes, you can, maybe as an actor or an actress, you can do a bunch of bit parts, a bunch of tiny roles in something, or be, I don't know, a recurring character on like a sitcom or a drama, but you're not a main character, something like that. And you can feel as if, well, yeah, I'm doing a good job, but I'm still not fulfilling my calling, so to speak. And I think my calling is to be either a big time star like Tom Cruise, or to at least have a show on where I am a regular and I'm a crucial, integral part of a cast. So once you do that, once you get to a certain level, then you can start actually categorizing whatever work you did beforehand, or whatever work you're doing now, or whatever, again, just whatever thing you feel is not within your calling, whatever thing you feel or felt was, I guess, beneath your calling or beneath you or what have you, you can categorize those things as not being nearly as significant within not only your own life, but I guess within the entirety of the industry, so to speak. And so this is where we oftentimes get the idea of, I guess you can say, the differentiation between not only genres within the industry, but certain types of work within the industry, right? So there are certain people who they will swear up and down, like, don't do a comic book movie because comic book movies are this or that or blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. Maybe they're cheap. Maybe they aren't filled with good acting. Maybe they appeal to something, whatever. They can essentially say that because they've categorized it as something that is outside of the realm of their own calling. Therefore, it is essentially a cheaper thing. Like, do you guys understand what I'm saying? Is that, again, if it's outside of the calling, most actors and actresses, once they get to a certain level, then they suddenly start to categorize things, and they say, well, I want to do good work, or I want to do meaningful work, as if anything that they did beforehand wasn't good or wasn't meaningful. It's not just about the idea of getting to a point in which they can choose the roles that are offered to them. They can pick and choose what role they actually do and what they are a part of. But it sometimes can get to a point to where this thing is beneath me simply because this is not the trajectory that I want for my career. Not necessarily because that thing is going to ruin my career or anything, but it's just not part of my calling. It's just not part of my purpose. It is something outside of the realm of what I would normally do. And again, even when it's outside of the realm of what they normally do, they can categorize it even more and put it in a box and say that, well, this thing, because actors and actresses and all artists, we also like to challenge ourselves, right? Well, what's more challenging than doing something outside of what you normally do, outside of your normal realm? But they can come in and they can say, well, yeah, that's outside of my normal realm. Maybe it might challenge me, but most likely not. Therefore, I'm not going to do it. And so the hypocrisy that we have inherently, coupled with the idea that we have a calling, have a higher purpose, can sometimes cause these splits in Hollywood in which we look at some things and we say, those are nice, but they're beneath us. They are not award worthy. They are not worthy of further dissection. They are simply, even if they're good, and even if we enjoy watching them, consuming them ourselves, they're just not something that we would participate in. So then finally, what's the most important part about this? The most important part about this is that when you have an entire industry that potentially operates in this same or in a similar way, in which there are a lot of people who feel like they are either called to tell a particular story or called to do a particular job, and it goes above and beyond what I guess fans would want or what other people would want for them. What tends to happen is that there becomes a lot more indulgence at the top from people who of and by people who have made it, quote unquote, to indulge in things that may not necessarily connect with the audiences that they are then sent out to. By making what you do as what your career is into your calling, into the purpose, the reason as to why you may even exist on this earth, but especially the reason as to why you do what you do in your career, you in some ways can divorce yourself from the very consumers that you ultimately need to some extent please. And I think that we may very well be seeing a bit of that in Hollywood right now, to where yeah, there are some things that cater specifically to fans, right? We know that there are plenty of things that cater specifically to fans, but then there's also there's also a lot of stuff that doesn't seem to cater really to almost anybody. Like the actors and the actresses and the people involved, they will come in and they will talk about the difficulty in creating the story, etc., etc. But ultimately, you're like, well, maybe you didn't have to create the story at all, because it's unappealing to almost anyone, and you can quite easily forget, once something is your calling, that it is still ultimately a career. It is still a business. Yes, it's show business, but you gotta remember that you focus in on creating the best show, but you can't forget the business aspect of it. I think it's very important that both we as consumers and anybody out there that I'm talking to who is an artist or entertainer in the industry, I think it's important that both of us know and understand that we need to bring our motivations maybe a little bit closer to each other, maybe just a little bit closer. And again, as I said, this is not solely something that's on the industry itself. I will talk probably much later down the road about the fans and their aspect and how they play into this thing as well, because especially from this idea of it being a calling, fans can bolster that idea within an actor or an actress and make them essentially almost pigeonhole them into doing specific things in their career. Okay, but that's for another video. We'll talk about that another time. So I hope that you got something out of this video to understand where I'm going with this. I hope that this video was a little shorter than some of the other ones. You know, I didn't really want to keep you as long as I kept you even. I was hoping that this would be like a 15-minute video, but I don't know. I am rambling on now, so I will end the video. I still don't have a sign off. Hey everybody. So while I don't have an official sign off yet, I guess I should do the whole please like, comment, share, and if you so desire and you want to see more, subscribe. But more importantly, I will ask that you please go and purchase one of my books. They are mostly ebooks, and pretty much they are all under $10. See if any of my work is actually any good, if it lives up to any of the things that I'm talking about here on my channel, specifically with the entertainment industry videos. So please go purchase my books. All of my links are down below. Thank you.